the Soviet officer who refused to start a nuclear war. In October 1962, the world came closer to nuclear annihilation than at any other moment in human history. The episode is remembered as the Cuban Missile Crisis, a 13-day confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union that unfolded in public through speeches, naval blockades, and diplomatic cables. What is far less known is that, at the most dangerous moment of the crisis, the fate of the world did not hinge on presidents or generals, but on the moral judgment of one Soviet naval officer, Vasili Arkhipov. This is not a myth or a legend embellished by hindsight. It is a documented episode, reconstructed from declassified Soviet and American records and confirmed by the testimony of participants. It is a story of institutional failure, human fear, and individual responsibility under unbearable pressure. The strategic context. In 1962, the Cold War was defined by mutual suspicion and the logic of deterrence. The Soviet Union, lagging behind the United States in intercontinental ballistic missiles, sought a shortcut, secretly deploying nuclear missiles to Cuba, just 145 kilometers from Florida. The move was intended to counterbalance U.S. missiles in Turkey and Italy and to protect Fidel Castro's government from another American-backed invasion. When U.S. reconnaissance flights discovered the missile sites, President John F. Kennedy ordered a naval quarantine of Cuba. American warships surrounded the island, prepared to intercept Soviet vessels. Both sides publicly signaled restraint while privately preparing for war. Beneath the surface of the Caribbean Sea, however, the situation was far more volatile. The submarines no one was tracking. Unbeknownst to the U.S. Navy, for Soviet diesel-powered submarines, B-4, B-36, B-59, and B-130 were already near Cuba. Each carried a nuclear torpedo with a yield roughly equal to the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Even more alarming, the submarine's captains had been authorized to use these weapons under certain conditions, including if they believed war with the United States had begun. Communication with Moscow was extremely limited. Once submerged, the submarines were effectively cut off from the chain of command. They relied on fragmentary radio signals, many of which they could not receive clearly. One of these submarines was B-59. Inside submarine B-59. By late October, B-59 was in dire condition. Designed for colder waters, the submarine was operating in tropical heat. The air conditioning had failed. Temperatures inside reached over 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon dioxide levels rose to dangerous levels, causing dizziness, confusion, and panic among the crew. Men collapsed at their posts. 4 days, B-59 had been hunted by U.S. Navy destroyers. The Americans were unaware the submarine carried a nuclear weapon. Their intention was to force it to surface for identification, using practice depth charges, small explosive devices meant as signals, not attacks. From inside the submarine, the situation looked very different. Explosions shook the hull. The crew did not know these were warning charges. They could not surface without risking capture. They could not contact Moscow to ask for instructions. The last news they had received was that U.S. forces were on high alert. Captain Valentin Savitsky concluded that war might already be underway. The vote to launch. According to Soviet naval protocol at the time, launching a nuclear torpedo required the consent of 3 officers: the submarine captain, the political officer, the flotilla chief of staff if present. On B-59, all 3 were aboard. Captain Savitsky was furious and exhausted. He reportedly shouted that they would die with honor rather than surrender. The political officer Ivan Maslenikov agreed. From their perspective, the submarine was under attack by American forces. If war had begun, retaliation was their duty. The nuclear torpedo was armed. One man had not yet agreed: Vasili Arkhipov. Vasili Arkhipov was not the captain of B-59. He held a quieter but critical role: chief of staff of the submarine flotilla. His presence aboard was due to his seniority and experience, not to command that particular vessel. Arkhipov was uniquely qualified to understand the consequences of escalation. Just a year earlier, he had survived the K-19 nuclear submarine accident, in which a reactor failure nearly caused a catastrophic meltdown. He had seen firsthand how close technological systems could come to disaster without enemy action. Inside B-59, Arkhipov assessed the situation differently. He argued that the Americans were signaling, not attacking. There was no confirmed evidence that nuclear war had begun. Launching a nuclear torpedo would guarantee escalation, likely triggering a full-scale nuclear exchange. This was not a philosophical debate. The submarine was suffocating. The crew was physically and mentally deteriorating. The captain was enraged. The explosions continued. Arkhipov refused to consent. A moral stand under extreme pressure. Archipov's refusal was not passive. He argued forcefully, repeatedly, and at personal risk. In Soviet military culture, defying a superior officer in a combat situation could end a career or worse. But protocol was clear. Unanimity was required. After intense confrontation, Savitsky backed down. The torpedo was not launched. B-59 surfaced and was escorted away by U.S. forces. No one on the American ships ever knew how close they had come to nuclear destruction. The crisis ended days later through a negotiated settlement between Kennedy and Khrushchev. The world never learned Archipov's name. Why Americans rarely heard this story. For decades, this incident remained buried in classified archives on both sides of the Iron Curtain. In the United States, Cold War narratives emphasized presidential leadership and American restraint. The idea that a single Soviet officer prevented catastrophe complicated the moral clarity of that story. In the Soviet Union, Arkhipov was not publicly celebrated. Admitting how close unauthorized nuclear use had come would have exposed dangerous flaws in command and control. Arkhipov himself did not seek attention. He continued his naval career quietly and retired without fanfare. It was only after the Cold War, through declassified documents and conferences involving former Soviet officers, that the full story emerged. Not a myth, but a warning. Vasili Arkhipov did not save the world through heroics or brilliance alone. He did so by refusing to surrender moral judgment to fear, doctrine, or rage. His decision was grounded in uncertainty, responsibility, and restraint. The lesson is unsettling. The survival of civilization once depended not on systems, treaties, or leaders, but on one exhausted man saying no inside a steel tube under the sea. That is not comforting. It is a warning. Subscribe for more true stories about history, war, and human consciousness.